So you think you know the difference between bush beans and pole beans. I thought I did too, till a couple years ago I started growing more bush beans, and I learned some really important points that I'd like to discuss in this video. These are my pole beans, and I grow them up a trellis here. Makes picking really easy. By the end of the summer, the vines are usually over the top and hanging down, but that's okay, they're still easy to pick. Now let's have a quick look at the difference between pole beans and bush beans. Pole beans are vines. They take a little longer to start producing fruit, but once they start making the beans, they produce them over a longer period of time. So these are good for eating fresh. In my Zone 5 garden, I can pick beans every couple days for 2 or 3 months. And that's great because I like to eat them that way. I don't can the beans. The problem, of course, is you have to grow them up some sort of poles or trellis system, and I like this trellis system here. The dead plants in there are peas, so that's my early crop growing up here. Beans you have to plant once the weather's warmer, and so they come later in the season. Quite honestly, this is the worst bean crop I've ever had. We've had a crazy summer here. Really cool spring, and now it's super hot. The beans don't seem to be really happy, but I still have beans. And in fact, this small trellis is lots for the family. What about bush beans? As the name implies, they grow short, nice bush. You don't have to stake them or provide them with a trellis, and that's one of the advantages. They start producing earlier in the season because they don't have to grow such a big plant. They produce all the beans at one time. At least that's what the internet and all the books tell you, and that's what I believed for many years. An earlier harvest all at once, which is great for farmers because they want to harvest everything and get the crop done for the year. It's also great for canning. That way you can pick a large number of beans, and in a day or two you can finish the job. But is that information really correct? So I've always grown pole beans because I like the longer harvest. But a couple years ago I thought, you know what? The problem with pole beans is that they take longer to produce, and so I have to wait till late summer to get my first bean. Wouldn't it be nice to have some beans earlier in the summer? So I thought I'd plant a couple bush beans, use them for my early harvest, and then when they're done, I'll just switch over to my pole beans. Well, it was a great success. The bush beans produced earlier, as advertised. That was great. And then I thought, why do these plants stop producing beans? Why would bush beans stop producing and pole beans produce all summer long? Didn't make a lot of sense to me, although it could be due to the genetics. So I tried a couple experiments. First thing I did was I took one bush and I picked the beans very diligently. As soon as they were big enough to eat, I would pick them. And you know what? That one bush kept producing all summer long. I was sitting here in October still pulling beans off them. A second little experiment I tried is that once the beans were ready, I harvested them, and then I cut the bush back to 3 or 4 inches. I figured if I cut it back, it probably will regrow and then make more beans. And that's exactly what happened. So bush beans are determinant. They like to produce everything at once, but if you treat them a little differently, they in effect become indeterminate. They will grow and produce beans all summer long. The best option is to just keep picking them. Cutting back also works, but then you have this gap where you don't have beans. So it's much better just to keep picking them. Don't let them get overripe, because I think when they get overripe, it sends a signal to the plant that says, hey, I'm done, shut down for the summer. But if you keep picking those beans, it sends a signal to the plant that says, hey, you haven't produced your seed yet. You got to keep growing, make more flowers, make more beans. So what I've learned is that bush beans can produce all summer long, at least in my Zone 5 garden. Perhaps in hot zones where you have a very long summer, that's not going to work quite so well. but you can still extend the period where you can pick beans if you keep picking them. Hope that's been helpful to you. More beans in your diet is a good thing. Happy gardening.